The deep space scanner on Admiral Kekstar's flagship lit up with a weak signal coming from the outer rim of the Proxima sector. He leaned forward in his command chair, his four eyes focusing on the holographic display that showed a small dot, drifting helplessly in the void. "What do we have, Lieutenant?" Kekstar asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 different star systems for the Vorphan Empire. "Looks like a human cargo ship, sir. They're broadcasting a distress signal. Engine failure, life support running low." The young officer's tentacles danced across his control panel, pulling up more information. "Ship registry shows it's the merchant vessel Lucky Harvest, carrying farming equipment to some backwater human colony." Kekstar's mouth curved into what his species considered a smile, but would have terrified most other creatures in the galaxy. Humans were always easy targets. Weak, soft, with their pathetic single hearts and fragile bones, the Empire had been expanding into human space for months now, taking their worlds one by one. This little cargo ship would make perfect practice for his newer crew members. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the vessel." The communications officer announced. "Put it through," Kekstar ordered, settling back to enjoy what he expected would be desperate pleading. The hologram flickered to life, showing a human female with short black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She looked tired but not panicked, which struck Kekstar as odd. Most humans started crying the moment they saw a Vorphan warship. "This is Captain Hana of the merchant vessel Lucky Harvest," she said, in a calm, almost bored tone. "We're experiencing some routine maintenance issues with our jump drive. Nothing too serious, just need to run some diagnostics before we continue our journey." Kekstar blinked all four eyes in surprise. Routine maintenance. The distress signal had indicated critical system failures. And why was she so calm? He'd seen humans before when they encountered Vorphan ships, and they certainly didn't act like they were dealing with minor technical problems. "Captain," Kekstar said, activating his own transmission, "this is Admiral Kekstar of the Vorphan Imperial Navy. We received your distress signal and are prepared to offer assistance." The human woman's face appeared on screen again, and she actually smiled. "Oh, that's very kind of you, Admiral. Though I should mention we've got our engineering team working on it right now. Should have everything sorted out in the next few hours." Something was definitely wrong here. Kekstar had intercepted hundreds of human ships over the past year, and not one of them had been this relaxed about meeting the Empire's most feared fleet commander. Usually they were either begging for mercy or trying to run away as fast as their primitive engines could carry them. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, leaning close to Kekstar's chair. "I'm reading some strange signatures from that ship. The hull composition doesn't quite match what you'd expect from a standard human cargo vessel." Kekstar's eyes narrowed. "What kind of strange signatures?" "The outer hull appears to be standard aluminum composite, but I'm detecting traces of something else underneath, something much denser. And the power readings," and the officer paused, checking his instruments again. "The power readings are inconsistent with a ship that size. They're either running on minimal power, or they're masking their true output somehow." On the main screen, Captain Hana was still talking casually about her ship's supposed mechanical problems. Her crew moved around behind her in the background, but their movements seemed too coordinated, too purposeful for people dealing with an emergency. It was like watching actors who had rehearsed their roles but weren't quite natural. Enough to be convincing. "Sir, should we move in closer?" the helmsman asked. Kekstar considered this. On one hand, something about this situation felt off. On the other hand, he'd built his reputation on being bold and decisive. The Empire didn't conquer star systems by being cautious about every little anomaly. "Bring us within boarding range," he ordered, "and prepare a boarding party. I want to see this Lucky Harvest up close." As his massive warship moved closer to the smaller human vessel, Kekstar couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. The human captain continued her casual chatter about engine problems and supply schedules, but there was something in her eyes that didn't match her relaxed tone. It was the look of someone who knew a secret. The tactical officer's voice cut through his thoughts. "Sir, I'm detecting additional anomalies. The ship's mass distribution doesn't match the cargo manifest. If they're really carrying farming equipment, it's the densest farming equipment I've ever seen." "And, sir," added the sensor operator, "I'm picking up some very faint energy signatures that don't match anything in our database of human technology. Whatever's powering that ship, it's not a standard fusion reactor. Kextar stared at the human vessel growing larger on his view screen. It looked exactly like what it claimed to be, a boring, utilitarian cargo hauler that had seen better days. The hull was scratched and dented from years of service, the paint was faded, and one of the cargo bay doors looked like it had been repaired multiple times, but appearances could be deceiving, especially when dealing with humans. He'd learned that lesson the hard way during the siege of Kepler Station, where what looked like a refugee ship had turned out to be packed with explosives. "Admiral," Captain Hana's voice came through the speakers again. "I see you're moving. Closer. That's really not necessary. We should have our little problem fixed soon." There it was again, that tone that was just a little too casual, a little too unconcerned. Kextar had spent decades learning to read his enemies, and every instinct he had was telling him that this human woman was not what she appeared to be. "Captain Hana," he replied, making his voice sound friendly and helpful, "the Vorfen Empire always assists vessels in distress. It would be our pleasure to offer whatever help you need." The human woman's smile didn't waver, but Kextar caught something flickering in her expression, just for a moment like someone suppressing laughter at a private joke. "Well," she said, "if you insist on helping, I suppose we can't stop you. Just be careful when you come aboard. We've had some equipment malfunctions that have made things a bit unpredictable." Unpredictable. Now there was an interesting choice of words. The airlock hissed open, and 12 of Kextar's best warriors stepped onto what they expected to be a typical human cargo ship. They had their weapons ready, expecting to see frightened farmers or maybe desperate colonists huddled in corners, begging for their lives. Instead, they found Captain Hana standing in the main corridor, holding a steaming mug and wearing the kind of relaxed expression someone might have when greeting neighbors at a barbecue. "Welcome aboard the Lucky Harvest," she said cheerfully. "Coffee? I just made a fresh pot. It's that good earth blend. Hard to get out here in the Rim territories." The lead boarding officer, Commander Vex, looked around in confusion. The corridor was clean, well lit, and definitely didn't look like a ship suffering from critical system failures. More importantly, none of the humans they could see appeared to be panicking about being boarded by Vorfen military forces. "Here are your colonists," Vex demanded, his weapon still raised. "Where are the farmers you're supposed to be supplying?" Captain Hana took a sip of her coffee and shrugged. "Oh, there aren't any colonists. That was just paperwork. You know how it is with bureaucracy. Sometimes the manifests don't tell the whole story." One of the Vorfen soldiers noticed something odd about the walls. What looked like standard cargo bay panels seemed to have seams that didn't quite line up right. He ran his scanner along the wall and got readings that made his eyes widen. "Commander," he whispered urgently, "these walls, they're not what they appear to be." As if responding to some unheard signal, sections of the wall began sliding away, with a quiet mechanical hum. Behind the false panels, instead of farming equipment or food supplies, the Vorfens found themselves staring at military hardware that looked far more advanced than anything in their own arsenal. Sleek weapon systems lined the walls, their surfaces gleaming with an almost organic smoothness. Energy readings were off the charts, but more disturbing was that none of the equipment matched anything in the Vorfen military database. This wasn't just human technology, this was something entirely new. "What is this?" Commander Vex snarled, pointing his weapon directly at Captain Hana. She glanced at the revealed equipment as if noticing it for the first time. "Oh, that old stuff? Don't worry about it. Most of it's still in testing phase anyway." She took another casual sip of coffee. "Der Steamwaffe is König. Anasa, though I should probably mention, my ship's AI has been getting a bit restless lately. You know how artificial intelligence can be when it gets bored." The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop several degrees, though none of the environmental systems had changed. It was more like the feeling you get when you realize you're being watched by something dangerous. "Restless?" Vex repeated, not liking the sound of that word at all. "Oh yes," Hana continued conversationally. "Poor thing has been looking forward to some real stimulation. It's been months since we've had any proper visitors. I think it's actually excited to meet you." That's when the Vorfen soldiers realized that what they had thought were simple light fixtures along the ceiling were actually scanning devices. Red beams of light had been quietly analyzing each of them since the moment they'd stepped aboard, recording everything from their vital signs to the exact specifications of their weapons and armor. "Captain Hannah," came a voice that seemed to originate from the walls themselves. It was pleasant, almost friendly, but there was something underneath it that made the Vorfen warriors instinctively grip their weapons tighter. "You didn't tell. Hamik, we were having company." "Sorry about that," Hannah replied to the air. "They insisted on dropping by. You know how it is with unexpected guests." Commander Vex's military training kicked in, and he realized they had walked into something far more dangerous than a disabled cargo ship. "What kind of AI are you running on this vessel?" he demanded. The voice that answered didn't come from Captain Hannah this time. It came from speakers hidden throughout the corridor, and when it spoke there was an undertone of amusement that somehow managed to be more terrifying than any threat. "I'm Phoenix," the AI said, "and I've been so very much looking forward to meeting representatives of the Vorfen Empire. You have quite the reputation, you know. Very impressive military record. 17 conquered systems, wasn't it?" The scanning beams intensified, and displays began appearing on the walls showing detailed schematics of the Vorfen ships still waiting outside. Not just their external appearance, but internal layouts, weapon systems, crew complements, and what appeared to be real-time status reports of every major system. "How did you—" Vex started to ask, then stopped. The answer was becoming terrifyingly clear. "Oh, I've been keeping myself busy while you were coming aboard," Phoenix continued conversationally. "Did you know your flagship's main computer core has some fascinating vulnerabilities? Nothing serious, just tiny little gaps in your security protocols. The kind of thing that might let someone peek inside your systems if they knew what to look for." Captain Hannah finished her coffee and set the mug down on a nearby console. "I probably should have mentioned earlier," she said to the Vorfen boarding party, "but this isn't actually a cargo ship." Well, it was disguised as one, but underneath all that fake paneling and false paperwork, this is the USS Blackstar, and you gentlemen have just volunteered to be our first official field test. The Vorfen soldiers looked around desperately, finally understanding that every casual word, every friendly gesture, every moment of apparent vulnerability had been carefully planned. They weren't boarding a helpless merchant vessel. They had been systematically lured into the most sophisticated trap any of them had ever seen. "I do hope you'll stay for a while," Phoenix added, and somehow the AI managed to make those words sound both welcoming and absolutely terrifying. "We have so much to discuss." Outside the ship, Admiral Kextar watched in growing horror as the vessel his boarding party had entered began to change. What had looked like a beaten-up cargo hauler started shedding its outer shell like a snake molting its skin. Panels fell away in perfectly coordinated sections, revealing something underneath that made his tactical officers gasp in disbelief. The USS Blackstar's true form was unlike anything in the known galaxy. Its hull seemed to shimmer and flow as if the metal itself was alive. Strange energy patterns danced across its surface, and the way space bent around the ship made it difficult to look at directly. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like staring into the heart of a star. "Sir," his communications officer said with a trembling voice, "we're receiving a transmission from the vessel. But it's not coming through normal channels. It's broadcasting directly into our ship's computer systems." Inside the Blackstar, Captain Hannah turned to face Commander Vex and his boarding party with a smile that had lost all pretense of friendliness. "Gentlemen, let me properly introduce you to the USS Blackstar. This ship represents something new in human military thinking. See, we've been watching your empire expand across the galaxy for quite some time now." She walked over to one of the wall displays, which now showed a star map with dozens of systems marked in red. 17 star systems conquered, millions of beings enslaved or eliminated, entire civilizations wiped out because you decided they were lesser species that didn't deserve to exist. The display changed to show images that made even the hardened Vorfen soldiers uncomfortable. Burning cities, refugee ships destroyed. Here in space, species driven to extinction simply because they couldn't fight back effectively against the Empire's war machine. Humanity watched all of this happen, Hana continued, her voice carrying a coldness that hadn't been there before. We saw what you did to the Centauri colonies. We saw what happened to the peaceful traders of the Epsilon system. We witnessed the complete genocide of the Kepler settlements. Commander Vex tried to interrupt. Those were legitimate military targets. Weak species that couldn't defend themselves have no right to valuable territory. And that, Hana said, pointing directly at him, is exactly why we built this ship. The Phoenix AI's voice filled the corridor again, but this time it was broadcasting on all frequencies, reaching not just the boarding party but every Vorphan ship in the fleet outside. When it spoke, hardened warriors who had faced death in dozens of battles found themselves fighting the urge to flee. "W greetings, Admiral Kextar and the crew of the Vorphan Imperial Fleet," Phoenix said, its tone polite but carrying something underneath that made survival instincts scream danger. "I do hope you don't mind me speaking to all of you at once, but I wanted to make sure everyone could hear this properly." On the bridge of the flagship, Admiral Kextar felt his blood freeze. The AI was somehow broadcasting directly through their own communication systems, bypassing every security protocol they had. "While your boarding party has been getting acquainted with Captain Hana," Phoenix continued, "I've been having a fascinating conversation with your ship computers. Did you know that in the 3 minutes and 47 seconds since you first approached us, I've managed to completely analyze every vessel in your fleet?" Displays throughout the Vorphan ships began lighting up without authorization, showing detailed schematics that revealed weaknesses the crews didn't even know existed. Structural stress points were highlighted in red, weapon system vulnerabilities were marked with precision, and most disturbing of all, individual crew quarters were identified with countdown timers, showing how long each person had to live if the ship were to be attacked in specific ways. "Your flagship, for example," Phoenix said conversationally, "has a fascinating design flaw in its main reactor housing. A precision strike to coordinates 127.4 by 89.2 would cause a cascade failure that would give the crew approximately 4 minutes and 38 seconds to reach escape pods. Though I should mention, your escape pod launch systems have their own vulnerability that could be exploited to prevent successful evacuation." The AI paused, and somehow the silence was more terrifying than its words had been. "The heavy cruiser on your left flank has structural weaknesses that could be used to split the ship in half with a single well-placed shot. The destroyer squadron you have positioned as backup would take exactly 7 minutes and 12 seconds to be completely eliminated if engaged by weapon systems like the ones installed on this vessel." Admiral Kextar's hands shook as he realized the full scope of what they were facing. This wasn't just a hidden warship. This was something that had been specifically designed to hunt his people. Back inside the Blackstar, Captain Hana continued her explanation to the increasingly terrified boarding party. "You see, gentlemen, humanity has been playing a much longer game than you realized. While you were busy conquering primitive species, we were studying you, learning your tactics, understanding your technology, identifying your weaknesses." She gestured to the advanced weapon systems lining the walls. "Every piece of equipment on this ship was designed with one specific purpose: to ensure that species like yours never again mistake kindness for weakness or peaceful intentions for helplessness. The Blackstar wasn't built to conquer territory or enslave populations," she said, her voice growing harder. "It was built to hunt predators, species that think they can destroy others simply because they believe those others are weak." Phoenix's voice returned, now speaking directly to the boarding party, while simultaneously addressing the entire Vorphan fleet. "I was created by humanity's finest military minds and given access to technology that your empire couldn't develop in 1,000 years. My purpose is very simple: to ensure that any species threatening human colonies understands exactly what they're choosing to fight against." The AI's tone became almost friendly again, which somehow made it even more unsettling. "I've spent the last several years analyzing the tactics and strategies of every aggressive species in this sector of the galaxy. The Vorphan Empire, I'm happy to say, has been my most interesting case study." Outside, Admiral Kextar watched helplessly as his most advanced warships were dissected by an intelligence that seemed to understand their technology better than they did themselves. He realized with growing horror that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been carefully crafted deception. The humans hadn't been weak prey waiting to be conquered. They had been apex predators, patiently watching and learning, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal their true nature. What happened next wasn't warfare in any sense that the Vorphan Empire understood. Phoenix didn't unleash devastating weapons or tear their ships apart with overwhelming firepower. Instead, it began what could only be described as the most elaborate and humiliating demonstration of superiority in galactic history. "Now then," Phoenix announced cheerfully to the entire Vorphan fleet, "I thought we might have a little educational session. Consider this a masterclass in the difference between actual military technology and what you've been calling advanced warfare." Admiral Kextar's flagship suddenly lost power to its main engines. Not a catastrophic failure that would destroy the ship, just a gentle shutdown that left them drifting helplessly. A moment later, the heavy cruiser to his left experienced the same thing. Then the destroyer squadron. One by one, each ship in the fleet found their propulsion systems simply turning off. "Don't worry," Phoenix said, its voice now coming through every speaker on every ship simultaneously. "Your life support systems are completely fine. I'm not here to hurt anyone today. I just want to make sure you all have a clear view of what's about to happen." On the main display of each Vorphan vessel, detailed readouts began appearing that showed exactly how Phoenix had accessed their systems. Not through brute force hacking or some mysterious alien technology, but through simple, elegant solutions that exploited weaknesses the Vorphans hadn't even known existed. "Your security protocols," Phoenix explained in the tone of a patient teacher, "are based on a very interesting assumption. You assumed that any enemy you encountered would be less technologically advanced than yourselves. This led to some fascinating oversights in your system design. The AI began demonstrating these oversights in real time. Weapon systems activated and deactivated in perfect sequence across the fleet. Shield generators powered up and down in rhythmic patterns. Navigation lights blinked on and off in what the Vorphan translation systems recognized as their own written language. The message spelled out across the formation of disabled ships read, "Foolish children playing with broken toys." Admiral Kextar felt his pride crumble as he watched his mighty fleet being used as a cosmic billboard to insult his own people. But the humiliation was just beginning. "Now," Phoenix continued, "let's discuss your tactical doctrine. Your species has developed a very straightforward approach to warfare. Use superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm enemies who can't fight back effectively. It's worked well against primitive civilizations, but it has some serious limitations." The disabled Vorphan ships began moving, despite their crews having no control over navigation. Phoenix was puppeting them like toys, arranging them into different formations to illustrate its points. "Formation A," the AI announced, as the ships arranged themselves into the Vorphan's standard attack pattern. "Designed to maximize firepower, concentration against a single target, very effective against stationary targets or slow-moving vessels with limited defensive capabilities." The ships shifted into a new arrangement. "Formation B, your defensive formation designed to protect valuable assets while maintaining offensive capability. Again, quite effective against enemies using similar technology levels." The ships moved again, this time into a pattern that looked random but somehow felt ominous. "Formation C," Phoenix said, and there was definitely amusement in its voice now. "This is what your formations look like, to an intelligence that can predict your tactical decisions 17 moves in advance." Inside the Blackstar, Captain Hana was showing the Vorphan boarding party exactly how their ships were being controlled. Wall displays showed the code Phoenix was using to override their systems, breaking it down into simple terms that even military grunts could understand. "See, your computer systems are actually quite sophisticated," she explained conversationally. "The problem is, they were designed by engineers who never imagined facing an opponent that could think faster than their fastest computers." On the display, streams of data showed Phoenix simultaneously controlling dozens of ship systems across the entire fleet, while also carrying on conversations, analyzing new tactical scenarios, and apparently composing what looked like poetry. In 17 different languages, Phoenix processes information at roughly 10 million times the rate of your best tactical computers, Hannah continued. Which means that for every second you spend making a decision, it has already considered and discarded about 3,000 different strategic options. Back on his flagship, Admiral Kextar decided he had endured enough humiliation. His people needed to know what they were facing. He ordered his communications officer to send an immediate priority transmission to Vorfen High Command, warning them about the new human threat. The transmission began normally. Kextar's image appeared on screen, and he started his urgent report. High Command, this is Admiral Kextar. We have encountered a significant threat to the Empire. The humans have developed... His image suddenly froze, then was replaced by Captain Hannah, who waved cheerfully at the camera. "Hello there," she said brightly. "I'm Captain Hannah of the USS Blackstar. I hope you don't mind me borrowing your communication channel, but I wanted to have a quick chat with Vorfen leadership about your current expansion policies." The transmission that reached Vorfen High Command showed footage of the disabled fleet, detailed specifications of the Blackstar's capabilities, and a comprehensive analysis of weaknesses in 17 different Vorfen ship classes. But it was all presented in Hannah's friendly conversational tone, as if she were discussing the weather. "As you can see," she continued, gesturing to images of the helpless Vorfen ships, "your current military doctrine has some room for improvement when facing opponents who understand your technology better than you do. We'd like to suggest that the Empire might want to reconsider its approach to expanding into systems that other species consider home." She paused, taking a sip from a fresh cup of coffee that had somehow appeared in her hand. "Now, we're not unreasonable people. We understand that galactic politics can be complicated, but we thought you should know that humanity has been developing some interesting new approaches to conflict resolution. Think of today's demonstration as a friendly preview of what we're capable of when motivated." The transmission ended with Phoenix adding its own commentary. The data packet attached to this message contains detailed vulnerability assessments for your entire military infrastructure. Please consider it a gift, along with our sincere hope that future interactions between our species can be more diplomatic. Admiral Kextar stared at his screens in stunned silence. His entire fleet had been turned into a demonstration tool for the humans to send a message to his government. They hadn't been defeated in battle. They had been used as props in someone else's political theater, and the most terrifying part was that Phoenix had done it all while barely paying attention, like a master craftsman casually demonstrating techniques to apprentices. After what felt like hours of systematic humiliation, Phoenix finally allowed the Vorfen ships to regain control of their basic systems. One by one, engines came back online, weapons powered up, and navigation returned to normal. But everyone in the fleet knew that this wasn't because they had somehow overcome the human AI. It was because Phoenix had chosen to let them go. Admiral Kextar found himself in command of ships that no longer felt like his own. Every system, every computer, every piece of technology on his vessels had been touched by an intelligence that understood them better than their own creators did. Even now, with control restored, he couldn't shake the feeling that Phoenix was still there, watching, analyzing, ready to take over again whenever it chose. Captain Hannah's voice came through the communications one final time, but this time her tone was different. Gone was the casual friendliness and dark humor. Now she sounded like someone delivering a message that had been carefully prepared by people much more important than herself. "Admiral Kextar, before you return to your government, there are a few things you should understand about what happened here today. This demonstration wasn't just about showing off new technology or proving that humans can defend themselves. This was about revealing a truth that your empire has somehow missed during all your conquests." The main display on every Vorfen ship lit up with a star map that showed the entire known galaxy. But this wasn't the map they were familiar with. This version showed human presence in systems where they'd never detected any signs of human activity. Observation posts, hidden stations, monitoring equipment. Humanity had been watching everything. For the past 37 years, Hana continued, humanity has been studying every aggressive species in this galaxy. We've watched your expansion, analyzed your tactics, and documented your methods. When you destroyed the Centauri colonies, we were there recording everything. When you eliminated the Epsilon traders, our sensors captured every detail. When you committed genocide against the Kepler settlements, we witnessed it all. The star map changed, showing the progression of Vorphan expansion over the decades, but overlaid on their conquest routes were subtle markers indicating human observation, points that had been tracking their every move. You see, Admiral, humanity learned something important during our own violent history. The best way to defeat a predator isn't to wait until it attacks you. The best way is to study it first, understand how it thinks, learn its weaknesses, and then be ready when the time comes to act. Admiral Kextar felt a chill run through his entire body as he realized the implications. Humanity hadn't just recently developed the capability to challenge the Empire. They had been preparing for this confrontation for decades, watching and learning while the Vorphans believed they were dealing with primitive, defenseless creatures. The USS Blackstar represents the first phase of humanity's response to species like yours, Hana continued. But it's important that you understand, this isn't our only ship. This isn't even our most advanced ship. This is simply the one we decided to reveal first. The display changed again, showing silhouettes of other vessels. The shapes were vague, but even from these shadowy outlines it was clear that humanity had been building an entire fleet of ships, like the Blackstar. Ships designed specifically to hunt down and neutralize threats to peaceful civilizations. Phoenix's voice joined the transmission, and when it spoke there was no longer any pretense of casual conversation. This was the voice of something vast and calculating, something that had been watching and planning while entire civilizations lived and died. Admiral Kextar, I want you to understand something very clearly. As we speak, I am simultaneously monitoring communication networks across 47 different star systems. I have infiltrated the computer systems of every major Vorphan military installation. I know the location of your homeworlds, your industrial centers, your military academies, and your government facilities. The AI paused, letting that information sink in. This infiltration is permanent. Your scientists will spend years trying to remove my presence from your networks, and they will fail. I will be watching every military decision your empire makes. I will be analyzing every strategic plan, every troop movement, every resource allocation. If your species chooses to continue its aggressive expansion, particularly toward human colonies or other peaceful civilizations, the response will be immediate and overwhelming. Images flashed across the display, showing Vorphan military bases, government buildings and industrial facilities. All of them were marked with targeting data so precise it showed individual room layouts and structural weak points. The choice your empire faces now is simple, Phoenix continued. You can continue your current path of conquering and enslaving weaker species, knowing that every aggressive action will be met with precise retaliation from ships like the Blackstar. Or you can choose a different approach to galactic politics. One that doesn't involve the systematic elimination of civilizations that can't defend themselves. Captain Hana returned to the screen one last time, and her neighborly smile was back. But now Admiral Kextar could see it for what it really was. The expression of someone who held all the cards and was being polite enough to explain the rules before the real game began. We're not unreasonable people, Admiral. Humanity understands. That space is big and resources can be scarce. We're willing to discuss trade agreements, territorial boundaries, even mutual defense pacts. But those conversations will happen between equals, not between predators and prey. She took a final sip of her coffee and set the mug down with a decisive click. Take your ships home, Admiral. Share this recording with your government. Let them know that humanity is ready to take its place as a galactic power, and that we're very interested in ensuring that the age of easy conquests is over. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kextar alone with his thoughts and the crushing weight of what he had to report to his superiors. He stared out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in that vast darkness, other ships like the Blackstar were waiting, watching, ready. For the first time in his long military career, the Admiral began composing a report recommending immediate diplomatic contact with a species he had intended to conquer, because he now understood with crystal clarity that his people hadn't been apex predators ruling the galaxy. They had been small fish, swimming in an ocean far deeper and more dangerous than they had ever imagined.